Bienvenidos de nuevo en un nuevo episodio de Mad Bitcoin Business. Está conmigo Alberto Mera, acompañándome en esta nueva aventura. Alberto Mera le conocéis todo de un podcast sobre Bitcoin, toda la referencia en todo lo que está relacionado con el mundo de Bitcoin y Bitcoin para negocio. Muchísimas gracias, Alberto, por estar de nuevo aquí conmigo.
Gracias. Gracias por invitarme porque hoy tenemos un temazo y tenemos un súper invitado que la verdad me hacía mucha ilusión. Siempre he sido muy fan de Pierre, que luego sabréis seguramente que Pierre es ya por lo que estoy diciendo, pero sí, muy fan y creo que se me nota un poco en la entrevista que lo he seguido desde hace mucho tiempo. He seguido su trabajo, no es que lo siga él, pero sí, sí que he seguido su trabajo y la verdad es que me ha gustado mucho cómo ha ido evolucionando y trabajando para diferentes sectores dentro de y alrededor de Bitcoin. Entonces, comprenderemos en esta charla mucha de la evolución que ha tenido Bitcoin y en particular la parte en la que se encuentra ahora, que es, digamos, la parte más de financiarización del activo. Concretamente, Pierre aquí viene a hablar de un aspecto o de una manera de financializar Bitcoin que no es la más tratada, pero que probablemente sea una de las que más se empleen en el futuro, son los bonos sobre Bitcoin. Entonces, hablaremos de eso, pero también repasaremos un poco su carrera y por qué ha tomado las decisiones que ha tomado alrededor de la evolución del activo. Así que, nada, muy fan de Pierre, a gusto porque responde escueto, pero responde al grano y veréis que no defrauda. Así que ganas de que venga ya Pierre. Y nada, pues Aldona, puedes decir quién es exactamente con apellido y todo para presentarlo y empezar.
Creo que todos ya saben, pero bueno, lo voy a decir en voz alta. Es Pierre Rochard de Bitcoin Bond Company, tal como dice Alberto. Los bonos con Bitcoin creo que es alguna cosa muy novedosa. Yo escuché sobre esto por primera vez hace casi un año, me explotó la cabeza cuando lo vi, porque la utilidad que tiene, no solamente para los gobiernos, municipios, pero incluso para las empresas, ¿no? Que están también emitiendo bonos, es increíble. Un camino por el cual vamos a ver cada vez más gobiernos, municipios y empresas yendo en futuro. Así que nada, una conversación muy interesante que os invitamos a todos para escucharla desde el principio hasta el final.
People wake up one day and they'll see, oh, the Bitcoin treasury companies have trillions of dollars of market cap. 20 to 50% of the Bitcoin are held by treasury companies. And then you have this just massive world of preferreds that are paying yield to people who find Bitcoin too volatile. And they'll wake up to that reality and they'll be looking in the rearview mirror, looking at the stock chart. And it's funny because I think that people tend to post the charts when the stocks have gone down, right? I don't think that sentiment creates price. I think that price creates sentiment. And so people find reasons for why things are the way they are. But ultimately, it's all about creating the long-term value and being focused on that and not worrying too much about kind of the short-term irrationality in the market. It's probably going to take like 5 to 10 years for people to really understand the business model. It's too new right now for people to model it and to understand it. The investors who understand the business model today will outperform the investors who don't understand the business model.
Hello, everyone. I'm here today again with Alberto Mera. We've got a special guest, Pierre Rochard, who is the CEO of the Bitcoin Bond Company. Thank you so much for joining us, Pierre.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
I think it's very good to have you here, and we're gonna skip all your history or your recent history because I mean you've been everywhere. You've been I wouldn't say bouncing because it sounds a bit weird, but you've been working in Bitcoin and attached to Bitcoin in different realms, let's so to speak. You've been in energy, now you're with treasury companies. You've been in Bitcoin as a whole. So we're gonna skip that part. We will probably cover some of it as we talk to you. But yeah, very good having you here. And I think Aldona has some questions for you. I will be also joining her in those. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, Pierre, what is Bitcoin Bond? Because as far as I understand, it's quite new instrument that was born while Bitcoin was progressing in its adventure in the adoption for the institutions. So if you could explain us and for our audience that still does know that this kind of instrument might exist, what it is, who would be the investors that would be looking for this kind of the instrument?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, a Bitcoin bond is a credit wrapper around Bitcoin, just like a Bitcoin ETF is a equity wrapper around Bitcoin. And so the purpose of it is really to be able to provide access to Bitcoin for investors whose mandate is to only invest in credit. And so when you look at the world of institutional investing, different portfolio managers have different mandates and investment policy statements and investment committees that steer them towards a particular direction of what kind of instruments that they're going to be investing in and have exposure to.
Let's maybe talk about a bit about the bond in itself, because so Bitcoin, as we all know it, doesn't provide of returns. It's a real asset, and therefore it comes without these cash flows that people like Warren Buffett and the like would probably love. But you're talking here about a Bitcoin bond, and again, a bond is something that usually comes with a yield. How do you do this? How do you create a Bitcoin wrapper that is connected to a bond in this case, instead of the equity wrapper, which, as you said, could be the ETF?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at any other kind of asset, there's really two ways that value accrues. One is through capitalization. So the principal increases, right? And so, for example, when you buy shares of Tesla, you're not expecting them to pay a dividend. You're expecting the value of the shares to appreciate. And then at the other extreme, you have instruments where the value does not increase at all and you just get paid income. And so you could look at, for example, a savings account, or you just have a yield. And so Bitcoin is definitely in the former, right? So Bitcoin proper does not pay any interest at all. And so all of the returns, all of the increases in purchasing power happen because the value of the Bitcoin themselves increase. And so that's increasing due to the scarce supply and the increasing demand. And so then, in order to enable this commodity to be accessible to credit investors who need to have income in some form, then you have to put it inside of a wrapper. And so that's why a Bitcoin bond is necessary. If Bitcoin just generated a yield on its own, then it wouldn't be necessary at all. Because really what a Bitcoin bond does is transform Bitcoin's capital gains into principal, interest, and any other kinds of payoff features.
Sorry, let me just point to something there, because, well, then it wouldn't be like a bond in the common sense, because usually when you buy a bond, you're expecting to get 2, 3, 4, 5%, 6% yield income annually based on that, and then you get the $100, let's say, the notional at the end. But in this case, of course, the return of Bitcoin changes year to year. So what should the investor expect from this bond? Like, should be expecting like years of great returns, years of negative returns?
Yeah, it really depends on when they're investing in it, right? Because if you look at, let's say it's a 5-year vehicle, right? And so the investors, they purchase the notes, the vehicle acquires the Bitcoin, puts it in cold storage, holds it for, let's say, a term of 5 years. After 5 years, the Bitcoin come out of cold storage, they're sold for dollars, and then the proceeds go down through the cash flow waterfall to pay all the principal and interest that has accrued during the 5 years. And so how those returns stack up is really going to depend on the sequence of returns, right? So if, for example, you originated a structure at the top of a bull market and then Bitcoin goes sideways for 5 years, which happened in 2017 to 2022, for example, then the outcome is that the senior tranches get paid interest, but the junior tranches get wiped out because they are actually paying up the stack. And so it really is about being able to tranche risk into different buckets so that different kinds of credit investors can find how much exposure to Bitcoin do they want versus how much principal protection do they want.
Just to confirm, so then in this case, the interest is paid from the junior tranches to the senior tranches.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. How does your bonds, the Bitcoin-backed bonds, are with the instruments that MicroStrategy now is offering, like the Strive, yes, that pays this famous 10% dividend? Is it some kind like of the competition instrument? Is it something different? Are there any similarities in terms of like looking for the potential investors?
So it's pretty different because what he's doing is a preferred equity, right? And so it's still a fixed income product,
Mm-hmm.
but it's in the wrapper of a perpetual preferred equity that pays a dividend. And so for any kind of credit investor out there, they wouldn't be able to access that because that's not within their mandate, right? So they need somebody, they need a note that is self-liquidating and has a maturity. These preferreds or perpetual. And so different investors have different interests and different features. And so that's why there's going to be I think probably one of the largest capital markets built on top of Bitcoin, far bigger than most other asset classes.
How do you go about making the first issue of a Bitcoin bond? Like, because you have to create this market. I mean, as far as I know, this market
Yeah.
doesn't exist, right? So you have to create the whole thing. I mean, because I mean, you could say that Saylor kind of created this thing, but not really, because I mean, preferred stock already existed, and also these convertibles. Even though he's become big in this sector, the sector already existed. So how do you go about creating the sector of Bitcoin bonds? How do you do that?
One step at a time, right? It's all about the work behind the scenes of doing the analytics, having the information, and putting together the package so that institutional investors, it fits within kind of what they're expecting, and lots of education, right?
So related to this, because I see in the case of strategy, they are overpaying, so to speak. They go with this preferred stock, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna pay you 10%. I'm talking, for instance, the STRC. They're going for a 10%, which sounds or looks like it's at the top of the range in the case of a preferred stock. So they're overpaying just because Bitcoin is not a well-known asset, and they're overpaying because of the perception of risk. So in the case of a Bitcoin bond, I assume you would try to also overpay just to get more interest and to find the appeal in the investor world. How would you go about trying to overpay investors? How do you sweeten the deal, so to speak, so you can create this thing and go on with it?
Yeah, so because it's an all debt deal and there's no equity component to it, all of the excess returns above principal and interest actually go back to the note holders as profit participation. And so I think that participation is really what makes it kind of self-contained. That there's not a residual equity tranche that is capturing kind of the magnified upside.
Hmm. So for the investor, at what stage are you now? Because I mean, I guess you're having already conversations. I wanted to ask mostly about what are the main obstacles or concerns that the investors are finding with this bond wrapper. If you're already having conversations with potential investors, what are the main risks, problems that they see with this vehicle or with this asset?
Yeah, well, the main risk is Bitcoin's price, right? So this is something that has been top of mind for investors for the past 16 years is the degree of Bitcoin's volatility, and the cyclicality of it. And so that's really where it's important to familiarize them with what Bitcoin's long-term returns are, and kind of cut through the noise of the short-term returns.
Okay. In terms of the adoption and your journey since you started the company, are there already any states or municipalities, any cities that are already thinking of adopting Bitcoin backbones?
Well, so that's a different concept, right? So that's
Hmm.
really the concept of saying, okay, well, if you're already issuing debt as a government entity, what you can do is you can actually pay less interest by adding a Bitcoin component to those sovereign debt issuances. I haven't seen anyone do it yet, but there's lots of proposals floating around.
All right. So you see it as a like feasible future within like 2, 3, 5 years, or it all depends on the price of the Bitcoin and like the feeling
Yeah.
of the market towards it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it probably does depend on that. And I also think it depends on the level of desperation from the issuer, right? Because I think that some of these governments might have trouble financing themselves using traditional debt, and that they'll have to rely on new forms of incentives.
Yeah. And with all the debt that USA is having now, that doesn't stop like popping up. It's like 38 trillion, as far as I remember correctly. Do you see that there is any possibility that in one point of the time, U.S. government will be also considering this kind of the instrument to pay off this debt, or at least to save in the interest?
It's possible. I think that their back would have to be up against the wall for them to actually do it.
I want to touch a bit on your story because, well, you've got a long story with Bitcoin. You wrote that article, The Speculative Attack on Bitcoin, which is something that we may be seeing now, where you are, when you are creating dollars to purchase Bitcoin, because I mean, every time that, new dollars are created, these are coming up of nowhere, and you're creating Bitcoin, which of course is finite. So this is already happening, and you wrote about this maybe like, well, with Alan Farrington 13 years ago or something like this, or 12 years ago maybe. So you wrote about this, so you had this in mind, but then you moved on to energy, where you were for a while with Riot, I believe. Also a very important, I think, move, because energy at that point was very important, and mining in general. But then you moved recently to the realm of Bitcoin finance with this Bitcoin bond company. And I wonder, since you've been here for 12 years already, and you've always been, moving to the next interesting thing, what do you think is the next interesting thing in the next 10 years for Bitcoin? Because it's already moved quite a bit. What do you think is the next big jump?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I would never have guessed what my path would be, and so with the hindsight, I don't think that it's predictable of what will kind of be the next evolution for Bitcoin. Um, if we look back, my first role in the Bitcoin industry was at BitPay, a Bitcoin payment processing company. And we thought that cutting credit card fees from 3% to 0% would drive Bitcoin adoption, right? That was like
Yeah.
the mindset we were in. And so I still think it's going to happen, right? Bitcoin payments. And so when I worked at Kraken, the focus was on Lightning, right? Getting Lightning into the hands of millions of people overnight. And it happened. Now, I think that the challenge for Bitcoin at the Bitcoin payments at this stage, it's actually a political challenge, right? To get the capital gains tax to not apply to small payments. Um, and that's really what I was interested in pushing forward writ large at Riot, was on the public policy side, right, of lobbying governments to create better conditions for Bitcoin. Um, One of those, obviously, on the energy side, is to make sure that Bitcoin's not discriminated against by energy companies or by regulators. Um, on the financial side, there were a number of different public policy issues that we lobbied for that were favorable for Bitcoin. For example, um, if you look at uh, with the election of Trump, the entire SEC essentially has done a complete 180-degree pivot, right? And so I think that the um, what we want to do with Bitcoin backed securities might not have been possible under a Gensler administration, right? So I think that the whole ecosystem completely changed with the election of Trump, and we've only started to see that get priced into Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin was at, I think, like $60,000 before Trump got elected. We saw it hit a all-time high of 124 like a month ago. Um, and so I just think that there's um, a massive shift that has happened. Will it another massive shift happen in the future? Yeah, absolutely. There's going to continue to be huge catalysts because at the end of the day, you don't change the monetary system with kind of um, incrementalism. I think that there's going to be, and it reminds me of Parker Lewis's book, Gradually Then Suddenly, right? So we fall under this illusion of, oh, Bitcoin's going to grow by a CAGR of 30% a year, and it's just going to be a straight line going forward until the year 2050, right? Um, but I think that there could be really big accelerations and reflexivity along that path.
I guess the trick is to have the bond in precisely that period when you go from gradually to suddenly, and then you can reap the rewards. Aldona, do you have
Yeah.
one?
Yes. I'm going to change the topic a little bit because I've seen in many of your interviews when you are like dive deep into how the companies are now squeezed, how they are struggling with the market nowadays. The growth is very hard. The borrowing costs are up. Cash in the bank, of course, is losing value. So just like in one sentence, how is Bitcoin their lifeline?
Um, Well, it's the strongest asset to have on your balance sheet, right? So I think that if the company's struggling and they don't have any assets on the balance sheet, then there's Bitcoin can't really help them, right? At the end of the day, they need to have something on the balance sheet that they are converting into Bitcoin. So in Saylor's case, it was dollars, right? So he had cash on the balance sheet, he converted into Bitcoin, and then it supercharged his company. Um, so I think that it starts with being able to get cash on the balance sheet either through financing, right? So there's lots of ways that you can finance a private or public company for that matter, um, and in operating cash flows and actually having a business that is allowing you to sweep the profits into Bitcoin.
I you made me think of something because, I mean, with your profile, you could have probably worked for any of the new Bitcoin companies, that have been created and launched in the past few months. But you decided not to, and instead you went for the Bitcoin bond, which is a completely different avenue, so to speak, of how to offer Bitcoin or exposure to Bitcoin. Is it your opinion related to what you were saying that Bitcoin companies, Bitcoin treasury companies, are not going to survive in their current form, and they need maybe to pivot to some way of earning cash flow and then using that cash flow to purchase Bitcoin? Or do you think is there a way for them to survive even if they don't have or generate any substantial cash flow?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that on the first part of the question about Bitcoin Treasury Company, my background when I started my career at Deloitte was in asset-backed securities, and so to me, I felt like that was the area that I'm most interested in, and it's kind of greenfield that nobody else is doing this. I did join the board of directors for Strive, which is a Bitcoin treasury company here in the U.S.,
Yeah.
ASST. So I'm very excited about what they're developing, and that's you know, I if we look at it, it's kind of funny because if you look at it, for example, the Bitcoin ETF, right? Bitcoin ETF does not have an operating business, right? So it charges an expense fee ratio, and BlackRock is making a massive amount of money off of IBIT. It's a material percentage of their revenue.
The main
Um,
one now, actually. Main
so
ETF.
yeah, I think the idea that there has to be an operating business. Um, I think that the operating business can be uh, equitizing Bitcoin, right? That is the operating business. And so how do the economics shake out? Well, the common stock accrues all the value that is created by the difference between the cost of the preferreds and Bitcoin's returns over the long run. And so that's the operating business. I think that if there's too much focus on like, oh, we should be a lumber company that generates cash flow from developing natural resources. That's that's a fine business to be in, but that's
in
not a
itself. Yeah,
Bitcoin treasury business. That's just a lumber business, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah. And it's also
um,
the thing. It's also a thing that I mean, you could get probably better returns just investing on Bitcoin. But so
well, that's the
that's
whole
why.
premise, right?
Yeah.
If you don't expect Bitcoin to have the highest returns of any other industry, then you would just go invest in that other industry that you think is going to do better, right? And I think that everybody who's involved in the Bitcoin treasury space, they're involved in it because they think that Bitcoin is the best investment out there, and that's that's the hurdle rate, so to speak. That the only way that a treasury company can outperform Bitcoin is by being leveraged long Bitcoin, and that all other avenues for outperformance ultimately might not pan out, right? And that's, I think, the big thesis.
Okay. Obviously, I didn't know about the Stripe thing. Otherwise, I wouldn't have said that. But then maybe we should talk about Semler, no? Because Stripe is the one that purchased Semler, right?
Yeah, I mean, so there's an active merger going on, so obviously I can't talk about it.
PT. Okay, maybe next time. Go on, Donna.
Maybe next time. How do you think what must change in order to the sentiment toward the Bitcoin treasury companies changes? Because the ones that have got the knowledge and have got the conviction, and those that study it and understand how it works, they will always be there and they will be like buying these stocks. They will never sell. They will always be like betting on those companies. But what must be changed? Maybe even those companies, how they operate, how they communicate, so that the broader market, like the traditional investor, takes more trust in their strategy and stops selling their stock.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to take like 5 to 10 years for people to really understand the business model.
Hmm.
It's too new right now for people to model it and to understand it. And so what will happen will be that Bitcoin will continue to accrue value faster than the preferreds are, paying dividends. And so that value will continue to accrue to the common stock. Um, the investors who understand the business model today will outperform the investors who don't understand the business model, and that this will take several years for it to really become clear, because you're going to need to see Bitcoin go up several times, right? And that it also it'll scale, and then people will wake up one day and they'll see, oh, the Bitcoin treasury companies um, have trillions of dollars of market cap. They're 20 to 50% of the Bitcoin are held by treasury companies, and then you have this just massive world of preferreds that are paying yield to people who find Bitcoin too volatile. And they'll wake up to that reality, and they'll be looking in the rearview mirror, looking at the stock chart. And it's funny because I think that people tend to post the charts when the stocks have gone down, right? And I actually
Yeah.
think that that's why sentiment is the result of price, right? I don't think that sentiment creates price. I think that price creates sentiment. And so people find reasons for why things are the way they are. Um, but ultimately, um, it's all about creating the long term value and being focused on that, and not worrying too much about kind of the short term irrationality in the market.
Okay.
Yeah, since you said that about the treasury companies and the sentiment, you see many people now taking victory laps about the fact that the treasury companies have gone down to around the 1.5 MNAF level. So what do you think could change this dynamic and maybe get MNAFs rising? Do you think we will see again like 2, 3, 4, 5 times MNAF in these companies?
I mean, those are big numbers. So I don't think that you'd necessarily get to a 5x MNAV like that, outside some extenuating circumstances. So when I think about what's going to drive MNAVs going forward, so one is Bitcoin price, right? So once Bitcoin price starts getting momentum and upward volatility, then that causes MNAV expansion. Second is leverage, right? So which companies are going to be successful in intelligently leveraging up using what I think is kind of the best template right now is STRC. Excuse me. So companies that are able to lever up, that's I think fundamentally what MNAV represents is it should be the inverse of their leverage ratio and Bitcoin's CAGR. So if we model it that way, then the other part of it too is that we've seen a massive amount of success in the AI HPC sector. So NVIDIA and all the associated names have really done tremendous numbers if you look at their charts over the past 3 years. And so I think that that has attracted a lot of technology interested capital that would otherwise have gone into Bitcoin. And so I think that that's another factor. And then, of course, gold, right? Gold on the other end of the spectrum for the kind of sound money investor has been very attractive over the past year. And so I think that as those become overvalued, right? So I would argue Bitcoin versus gold topped the ratio there. I don't think that it's going to make new all-time highs. We'll see. But I think now it's more likely to be mean reverting, and that Bitcoin's going to have a long leg up.
Coming back to the Bitcoin treasury companies, we are always focusing on the big ones, on the public ones, but there are also the ones like mid-size, small ones, a lot of them private ones that are trying to copy the playbook, but they are not like playing the same cards. They are not having the possibility as a strategy has to borrow at like 0% as strategy does.
Or do preferreds, yeah. Let's say about the preferreds, yeah.
I think that even on the convertibles, I mean, I understand the cash interest is 0%, but there is a cost to it, right? Because they do have to dilute the common stock at some point to equitize the preferreds, or sorry, the convertible notes. The private companies, they can have access to really great sources of financing as well, right? So private credit has grown to be a pretty large asset class here in the U.S. And so they can lever up other parts of the balance sheet to be able to acquire more Bitcoin. So I think that there's opportunities there as well in the private markets for Bitcoin treasury companies. But I do agree that overall, if you want to scale this up, and as Saylor put it, if you want to create a monster, you have to do it on the public markets. That's the only way that they're going to be able to attract trillions of dollars of capital.
Yeah.
I want to ask about the perception of somebody like you, who is an American and who is seeing all these things happening for Bitcoin in the US, and specifically how that impacts the future of Bitcoin. Because we have, of course, a global asset. And in Europe, it is what it is. Europe goes at this rhythm. Africa is not in the picture at the moment. But then we have Asia, a very important player in there with China. And then we have the US pushing hard for the digital assets, and in particular with Bitcoin and stablecoins. So, of course, you understand the US part, but how important do you think it is for Bitcoin in general that the rest of the world catches up to Bitcoin or gets interested by Bitcoin? Do you think this is going to change maybe in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, that's something, I would never have guessed that El Salvador would be the leader in sovereign adoption of Bitcoin, right? So I think that it's crucial that whatever hour of the day it is, someone somewhere in the world is working to increase the value of Bitcoin, right? And I love how just globally it's so active. And so I think that, look, the U.S. has the best capital markets in the world, right? And I think that's true, across any asset class. But the whole premise of Bitcoin is that it's global, it's permissionless, and so there are people mining Bitcoin in Africa, right? People using Lightning payments in Africa, people using Lightning payments in Central America and South America and Asia, and so I think that it's also what it calls for is longer term thinking across the world, right? And I think that that's going to have a very positive impact on humanity.
It's a good one.
That's the good one. You think that investors should start selling gold and buy Bitcoin instead?
I think they should, and not just because that would increase the value of Bitcoin or anything like that, but really because gold should be used for its utility, and the utility of gold is in electronics, dentistry, art, jewelry, and so I would love to see that gold be put to a better and higher use than collecting dust in the vault of the Fort Knox or whatever it is. And so I think that gold's increase in value, I remember I was talking with a jeweler and he mentioned that, you can kind of tell when a piece of jewelry was made based on how hollow the inside is. When gold's very expensive, the jewelry is hollow inside, and then it's solid gold when gold is more affordable. And so I think that it's really a shame that so much gold gets hoarded and used it as an investment. And the ideal solution is Bitcoin, right? And so Bitcoin doesn't have any other of these utilities, and so it's not causing any kind of other problems in society by having people store wealth in it.
Yeah.
Related to gold, I'm always curious because we've seen this financialization of Bitcoin, and of course, gold has been here for ages, and even with in the new financial era, we had gold, but we haven't seen the kind of products created on top of gold that we've seen on top of Bitcoin. So, what do you think is this way?
Yeah, I mean, gold doesn't really have all that much upside, right? So gold at this point is at full adoption, more or less. So and then the other problem with gold is that even when it does get demand, it doesn't take longer than 10 years to build a gold mine. And so they'll just keep mining more gold and diluting the supply. And so if you want to make an investment, that is long term, you want something that's not going to just dilute the supply long term.
Yeah.
Let me ask one, Aldona, because I've been thinking about this for a second, and it's about Strife because I guess you can talk about this one. But yes, Strife is one of those that hasn't gotten so much attention as probably the others. Like MetaPlanet, Strategy, Capital B in Europe. We know about that one quite a lot, or even SmarterWeb. But Strife has been like not so in the news as the others. So what are the plans for Strife, and what do you think has been so low profile so far?
Yeah, so the plan is really around these perpetual preferreds, and today it was announced that we're launching SATA, SATA. I can't talk about SATA because it's also kind of in the offering process here in the U.S. But the strategy for Strive is really to avoid the mistakes and embrace the successes of the Bitcoin treasury company model. And so, avoiding kind of financing that is too restrictive in terms of the options that the company will have going forward, um, and having enough scale to be to be leveraged long Bitcoin, right? And so, um, why is it kind of low key? Well, we're just getting started. So, Strive went public this year in a reverse merger. It's launching its perpetual preferred this year. It announced the acquisition of Semler, and so I think that for a team that is this, um, just less than a year old in terms of starting the Bitcoin strategy, Matt and Ben and Jeff and they've done amazing work of being able to set this up and make the right decisions and get it done in a very short time frame.
So just following up on this one, but how do you see the world or the sector of preferred stocks based or backed by Bitcoin in this case? Because of course, when you launch yours, you're probably going to be second in the US, I guess, after Strategies.
Yeah.
Strategies has like 4 different types of preferred stocks. I know you cannot talk about specifically yours, but how do you see the future going forward in terms of these preferred stocks? Do you see differences in the type of stock, because the 4 of them are different, and probably there are other types that could be tried? How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, maybe the biggest differentiator will be about marketing. And this is a question I asked of the strategy team on their earnings call last week. Was they mentioned marketing the preferreds, and I asked, how much money are you going to spend on the marketing? Because I think that what the opportunity is to identify kind of what are the best ways of marketing these and distributing these at scale so that these companies can continue to grow. And also it would help lower their yield, right? So if they got lots of demand for stretch, they could lower the interest rate,
Yeah.
and that lower or the dividend rate, and that lowers the costs for financing the Bitcoin and increases returns for the common stock. And so I think that marketing and distribution will be um, perhaps where they differentiate. But I think that that's going to be great. I mean, I look forward to seeing all these advertisements for Bitcoin powered preferreds.
There are
Yeah, I
already
was.
some in X. I saw some today on X. Well, done with
Yeah.
AI, but they are like very,
Yeah.
very, very nice ones.
Yeah, I actually, sorry, I just thought of something because, well, I have a podcast, which is not this one, but I have a podcast in Spanish about Bitcoin. I've been running for a while already, and one of my sponsors is Firefish, who you may know. It's a company that does Bitcoin-related loans. And of course, for a loan with Bitcoin, so a person leaves some Bitcoin and then asks for some money, backed by that Bitcoin. So for this to work, you need to have people that are lending the money, of course, and then people that have the Bitcoin and want to borrow. And what I found it very interesting is that in Spain, in particular, there is a lot of money available to be lent. All the money is coming from Spain in terms of loans, and then the rest of Europe is just borrowing and using their Bitcoin as collateral. So something like this makes me think like that something like STRC or whichever other preferred stock would be like a massive hit with kind of a country like Spain, where they like this interest, which is like 8, 9, 10%, and they just don't want the risk, they just want the interest. And if it's something like 8 or 9, it's crazy in Europe, because of course the rates here are lower. So I wonder, how do you see? Are you thinking? That expanding this business could be something that you could do, like expanding this market, like selling maybe preferred stock in Europe or in other countries could be a possibility.
So that I think was announced by Saylor on the earnings call that they're going to expand internationally. And I think it makes sense at their scale that they need to be tapping global capital markets. Um, what I imagine will happen will be that the local bankers and governments will see this and won't be happy about it because
Yeah.
they don't like competition, right?
Yeah.
So um, I expect that there will be another round of public policy debates where, for example, with Bitcoin mining, the critique was that we were using too much electricity. Um, with Bitcoin treasury companies, the critique will be that we're using too much capital, and that too much of the world's capital is going into something that they view as unproductive, right? They'll say,
Right.
oh, it's beanie babies, it's tulip mania, it's speculation. So they will definitely try to criticize, um, when really what they should be doing is making a better product. So, if they want to compete, they should raise their interest rates.
Yeah. It's going to be quite hard for the European companies, Bitcoin treasury companies, once Michael Saylor is here. Because the actors of the market, the investors will just go for the most secure one, yeah. And that's what Michael Saylor said. We are a monster, and we're gonna eat the world. Let's
Yeah,
see what's gonna
that,
happen.
I think that might create an opportunity for investors who want to buy some of these smaller companies at a lower valuation. And it's as long, it's like Sailor MSTR does not have access to a different kind of Bitcoin that appreciates in value faster than everybody else's Bitcoin, right? And so that's where I think that people could make some valuation mistakes about kind of what the relative value is between the different Bitcoin treasury companies.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to ask you one more, talking about this earning calls. There was like one question, I think it was done by Ben to Michael Saylor. And his response was, it was regarding what we should do at the moments like this, like when the market is like a little bit like going out of the Bitcoin treasury companies, the stocks are going down. So we have seen that, for example, in case of Metaplanet, they started to rebuy the stocks. And Michael Saylor said, what we are going to do now, we're just going to wait and do nothing. Because sometimes the best thing is like, don't do anything. What you think should be the normal approach in this kind of the situations, or each and every company should like just look for its way to survive those dips?
Yeah, so I think that we can go with three assumptions. One is that Bitcoin is perpetual. Two, the common stock is perpetual, and three, the financing of the perpetual preferreds is perpetual. And so, the time horizon came up right where, is MSTR going to outperform Bitcoin over 1 year? Maybe, maybe not. The goal that Saylor has is for it to outperform over 10 years. And so, I think that investors have to be comfortable with that. And to know that if he's right, they will be rewarded, right? So I agree with him that when the markets are closed, just stay home, right? He's got a perfect fortress balance sheet. There's no reason to be concerned about what the market's doing when the market is, I think, being influenced by external factors that ultimately are not permanent. And so, for example, while Bitcoin is permanent, how permanent is NVIDIA? I don't know. Like I could see a competitor come along and make better processors, better chips than NVIDIA. Why not? Intel used to be the big deal, right? And then now NVIDIA is a big deal. Maybe there'll be another chip manufacturer that's a bigger deal. So I don't think that'll happen with Bitcoin. I think that it's a completely different market because it's the monetary market. It's not the technology market.
Yeah, well, and we've seen this, no, with Saylor in 2022, he didn't do anything. That's it. He just waited, and I guess the same could happen. And if the same cycle, so to speak, repeats, then in a year and a half or so, a majority of these companies will just have a bigger balance sheet, and then they can start purchasing Bitcoin again.
And talking about cycles, and to wrap up, you always repeat that you should just buy Bitcoin, wait for years, do nothing, and that's it. If you could just like explain it like very simply.
Yeah, but Bitcoin is long-term savings, and so in order to make that effective, I think that it's really about putting it in cold storage. So if you're not interested in keeping an eye on Bitcoin treasury companies, like you want to put Bitcoin in cold storage so you don't have to worry about it and you can just forget about it and you can come back to it in 4 years. Any other investment, including a Bitcoin treasury company, you want to check on it every quarter, right? And see how it's doing and see, is management doing something good or is it doing something bad? Like what's going on? The beauty of Bitcoin's decentralization is that because it's immutable and it has this fixed protocol in place and the incentives are aligned, that it's not going to change in 4 years. And so that's what I think is really valuable about Bitcoin.
I guess that's also the rationale for the 5-year Bitcoin bond, no?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Makes sense.
Almost.
I mean, just 1 year more to be sure.
Just in case. Okay, Pierre, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing this incredible knowledge that you have. I hope to see you in Madrid. I don't know whether you decided already or not, but if you find the time in your, I imagine, very tight agenda, we would love to have you here. We're gonna make the event Mad Bitcoin Summit focused exclusively on the Bitcoin for institutions. So I think that like with your knowledge and with what your company presents, you would be like a great fit for the event. So I still hope you're gonna make it. And if not on May, just come whenever you are in Madrid, just give us a call and just have a great chat again.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank you.
much. Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye.